Hello, I'm Michael Levine, and welcome to another edition of Without Notes. Today, our guest is a Hollywood legend, but a legend of a different kind. He is the country's best-known private investigator, Hollywood private investigator, and I thought it would be fascinating to talk to Scott Ross about how his most unusual life has unfolded, working on some of the biggest trials in the last 3 decades. A lot of your big cases have come from your strong relationships with several of these super attorneys.
The criminal ones, yes, and a lot of the civil cases, I do a lot of work with an attorney, with Carl Douglas, who is Johnny Cochran's ex-partner, who did the O.J. Simpson trial.
Yep.
And Carl does civil cases, but he does wrongful death type cases against law enforcement, people who have been shot or assaulted by law enforcement. And those, because they protect themselves, law enforcement handles as if it's a murder. Mm-hmm. And I have so much experience in handling murder cases that I will go do a lot of those cases with Carl, civil case.
Got it. Mm-hmm. So the Bill Cosby also, an extraordinary case. And what is your work involved there?
We had, in the original trial, the judge was only allowing one, what's called prior bad act witness. And in our trial, the judge was going to allow 5, but we didn't have any information. So we had a list of 19 prospective prior bad act witnesses, and I spent 90% of my time just organizing and going through and doing backgrounds on those particular people.
A case with the Bill Cosby second case ends in a guilty verdict.
Correct.
Mr. Mesereau, who is not known for losing many cases, loses that case. You along with that. What is there another large case that you're involved in?
No, that was it. That was it.
The documentary that was recently broadcast, the
Leaving Neverland
documentary, right? You have been quite outspoken about what you thought to be the unfairness of the HBO broadcast. Talk about that for a minute.
Unfair would be a polite word. One of the things that I've maintained, and I get notifications and emails, what have you, from people that think I'm defending Michael, and I want to say again, I didn't know Michael Jackson. I did work on the Conrad Murray case. Yes. So,
Conrad Murray was the doctor guilty, convicted, found guilty of killing Michael Jackson.
Involuntary.
But
yes. And my point being is that all of this nonsense on Leaving Neverland, all of this Wade Robson statements and Safe Chuck, whatever, I'm defending my work, period, because he's making allegations that I forced him, or the, quote, legal team. And the legal team, back to what I had said before, Mesereau was so stuck on, I don't know what the proper term is, hell-bent on making sure that we didn't violate protocol of any nature. Tom had no contact, wouldn't allow any of the attorneys to have any contact with a potential witness. So the only people talking to those witnesses basically were me. Mm-hmm. My wife, who was also an investigator, orchestrated all of the logistics. Mm-hmm. She made sure that everybody was there, and so she had contact with several of the witnesses. But that was the only reason, is because she was bringing them in. Example, the Barnes family from Australia, Macaulay Culkin's attorney had to come in from New York. So my wife, Lisa, was helping to orchestrate and make sure that all of that took place. And, but as far as the statements by Robson or even Safechuck, the short version is that my outspokenness is defending my work, because I know what they told me, I know what I did, I know what they said, I know what didn't happen, and for them to turn around years later, I think is criminal, personally. But
Talk about your work as a private investigator. You've been doing this now 40 years on the highest profile cases in the world. I want you to explain to the audience some of the central lessons that you've learned, both about your work, the criminal justice system, working with high profile defendants. Talk about that.
Well, the criminal justice system has so many absurd flaws in it, I wouldn't even know where to begin. But I'll give you an example going back to Cosby and what happened during Cosby. Mm-hmm. There was a client whose name I won't use who was convicted of murder. 1 count of murder and 3 counts of attempted murder. He was sentenced to 150 years. While we were in trial in Cosby, he was released from prison because he didn't do it. Harlan Braun, again, was the attorney. I did the investigation on that case. We were able to prove he flat out didn't do it. But yet, the DA's office wasn't willing to admit that it wasn't him. Their own ballistics expert at the time, who is now my expert because of her honesty, I just brought her in on a shooting case that I have now, again, with Tom Mesereau. And the criminal justice system is about numbers. It's not about truth. You know, everybody wants to win. They all want to have a win. I used to make a joke when I was younger about putting
Sounds like a sports team.
Well, that's what I was going to say, putting out like attorney cards, you know, so you could flip over the card and see their win-loss record kind of nonsense. Mm-hmm. It's about winning. If you want to move up in the DA's office, you have to win the case. It's not about who committed the crime. It's not about justice. Yeah, justice. It's not. And law enforcement, you know, again, I never got there, but I think it was just my timing was more of the issue. There was actually a sheriff's department that had hired me, but I didn't want to work in the jails for 7 years, so I turned it down. In hindsight, with pensions being what they are, I probably regret it, but neither here nor there. But my point is that what I've learned is that you can't, just because somebody's been arrested, and I hear people all the time weaseling their way off of jury duty, and I think it's terrible because people really need to go on jury duty to understand the significance of the flaws in the system. I had a triple homicide. Basically 2 drug dealers killed 3 drug dealers, so nobody really cared. But we had 2 hung juries, and the 3rd time they were convicted because the prosecution, they have their agenda, they're just not going to give up. So they go back over and over, they clean up the witnesses are brought back in to testify again and again and again, and the juries believe what they want.
Do you feel that over 4 decades you've learned kind of intuitively to tell if somebody's lying to you?
Oh, sure.
You do?
Yeah.
And is that a skill that you learned over your career?
Yeah, I think it's just experience.
It's not intuitive.
Yeah, no, people spend so much time lying to you, and when somebody tells me a story, I sit and I listen to it regardless, even if somebody's telling me about a restaurant. I break it down in my head. I can prove that, I can disprove that I could care less.
Is the restaurant really open? Is it not?
You know, it just, again, just were they there? I took a lot of heat after, back to Robert Blake, I went to the restaurant, Vitello's, and I got the 2 brothers that own the restaurant to give me copies of the credit card slips, because this was on a Saturday, and I knew that they would have them. So Sunday I went there and I got the credit card slips, knowing they hadn't gone to the bank yet, because down the road, if they filed charges, I would now know the names of the people who were in the restaurant. And the LAPD got very upset with me for doing that. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. I think just witnesses either don't want to be part of it, or they want to be part of it, and you have to sort of weed through the 2 of them.
The agenda.
Yeah.
Scott, a fascinating conversation. Thank you for your openness and your spectacular career, and you revealed so many interesting thoughts of cases that people have followed throughout the decades. I think that the audience will find this incredibly valuable. I know I did. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I hope so. I appreciate it. Thanks, I enjoyed it.
Thank you for tuning in to this most fascinating conversation with the legendary Scott Ross, private investigator to the many of the stars you know and have watched throughout the years. If you've enjoyed the broadcast, please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, and thank you for watching.